Hello and welcome to another edition of Trade Talk. So much happened on the weekend. I can't wait to get stuck into it with Darren, Parkin. Daz, what a weekend of footy it was.
Yeah, it was a ripper. There was plenty to like out of it. Port Adelaide officially with their longest ever winning streak at 9. Geelong, with all their players out, they were trying to avoid 4 losses in a row for the first time since 2006. And they showed again that you can't write them off. And from a betting point of view, the Kangaroos have now covered the line as an underdog in every one of their Marvel Stadium matches this year, and especially the last 3 weeks under Brett Ratton. So Kangaroos all of a sudden have been a bit of a betting proposition.
Yeah, playing good footy at the moment, the Kangaroos. Hopefully they can get a win in the next couple of weeks. Potentially this week could be the week. But yeah, a few big talking points. Ed Richards for the Doggies, who's become a very important player, will miss up to 6 games with a hamstring injury. And then there's a lot to look forward to. Obviously, Buddy Franklin's 350th, Daz. What has Buddy meant to you watching him play over the last 10 years?
As a Saints fan, I've seen a bit of him. He played his 100th, 200th, 300th, and now 350th against the Saints. So a bit of a quirk of the fixture. But yeah, he's a cross between the traditional goal-kicking machines and the really mobile modern forward. He's one of the most unique players in the history of the game and has been amongst the top 2 or 3 players in the comp for pretty much his entire career. He's top 4 all-time goal kicker. No one will ever kick 1,000 again. He's been an incredible player. I know there's been a lot of talk about whether his move to Sydney was a success because they haven't won a flag, but I think, look, they've played in 3 grand finals since he went up there. He's kicked 400, 500 goals for the club. So I think if you had a set at the start, you're going to sign Buddy and you're going to play in 3 grand finals. They're taking that, and they would have expected to win one, but certainly not his fault.
100%, Daz. Just the 22nd player in AFL history to play 350 games. So congratulations, Lance. Buddy Franklin. Tex Walker also plays his 250th, and he's almost like a red wine, fine red wine. He keeps on getting better with age. How have you rated his season so far?
Yeah, pretty good. He's a magnificent kick for goal, and I think this year in a lot of the big games, he's really stood up. He's gone past the likes of Modra in terms of all-time goal kickers for Adelaide. Captained them into a grand final. Just been a superb player for a guy that's not necessarily as tall and as mobile as some of the others, but phenomenal kick for goal at distance, accuracy. He's been a wonder for them.
Yeah, 100%. I think that part of his game is so underrated. I think it's underrated in the AFL, goal accuracy. You just kind of know he's going to kick goals anywhere around the ground, especially in those big moments. We mentioned earlier, Ed Richards is going to miss 6 games. That leaves an opportunity for another Western Bulldogs player to potentially come in. And a name that's been mooted as a potential replacement is Caleb Poulter, who was the Dogs mid-season draft. He was playing VFL at the Dogs. What do you remember of him when he was playing at Collingwood? Anything there?
Yeah, he was one of their solid, ball-winning running options. They obviously had a lot of players like that at Collingwood, like the Browns, who obviously were squeezed out as well. So the Bulldogs have had a pretty good record with mid-season picks. Obviously, Gardner was one who became a feature of their defence. Collingwood are another side that's had a pretty good record in it. I think we'll see a few. Obviously, Sydney going for a bit of height as well in the pre-season draft, in the mid-season draft, given their injuries. So I think it's a terrific initiative, to be honest, and I think we'll see this used more and more going forward.
Yeah, 100% does. I really like the mid-season draft, and yeah, looking forward to hopefully some of these players getting another opportunity or a new opportunity to debut at their new clubs. Daz, one I really want to talk about, and we sound like a bit of a broken record player on Trade Talk. We actually really rate the Gold Coast Suns, and we've been talking them up for quite a while, and we like the positivity around the Gold Coast Suns. Well, let's do a little bit of a breakdown of their season at the moment. Who's playing well? Their leaders are certainly stepping up, but how have you seen the Gold Coast Suns season so far?
Yeah, I thought when Tuke Miller went down, you're speaking of leaders, he'd been so good for them that would be a hammer blow really on their season. They've been excellent in his absence. Obviously, his injury is lingering on a little bit, but guys that are turning into leaders like Rowell and Anderson, obviously Witts, who's been a captain of that club. Swallows obviously played well. Collins down back. You mentioned some of their younger players as well. Jack Lukosius, who has played a bit down back. He's played a bit on the wing. I had a look at a stat during the week or during their game against Adelaide. So 3 players have kicked 5 goals in a game 3 times or more this year. The 2 Coleman medal favourites in Charlie Curnow and Jeremy Cameron, and Jack Lukosius. He's the other one. So it's a tremendous effort. And he's done it against Geelong, the reigning premiers, the Bulldogs, who are in the mix for the 8, and Adelaide, who are in the mix for the 8. He's not beating up on the struggling teams. He's kicking 5 in big games against quality opposition.
He's really finding his place up forward there. Gold Coast ranked 3rd in the AFL for kicks and 18th in the AFL for handballs, but I actually don't mind that. What does that story sort of tell you, Daz?
Yeah, so obviously they're not over-possessing. They're a long and direct team. They use the space. They use the run. They're backing themselves, obviously, to get first hand and move forward, obviously, with the likes of King and Lukosius at times, Chol and Casbolt playing forward. So they're backing themselves in. They're playing a long and direct game, low possession game, which is serving them well.
And it's crazy to think that long and direct game. That means that there's a lot of belief in the side to back each other in one-on-ones or two-on-twos. And yeah, that's pretty remarkable for a young team. I think Stuart Dew's doing an amazing job. We talk about clearances, and the Gold Coast Suns ranked 2nd in the AFL for clearances. And, you know, that's no surprise when you've got Noah Anderson and Matt Rowell absolutely killing it at the moment, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, Rowell's a beast. Anderson, we'll talk about him a little bit later in the Brownlow tracker. But just looking at their run home, so they're 6-6. It's a 23-game season, not a 22-game season. So 13-10, 14-9 is probably where you need to be to make the 8. They've got some games they should win, like Hawthorn and teams like that in the run home. But they've got Carlton at the MCG, so a game they would expect to go all right in, but not easy. Collingwood at Metricon's clearly difficult. They've got both the South Australian teams away, so can they find a way to pinch one of them? They've got a home game against St Kilda, a home game against Brisbane, which is obviously the local derby, and they play Sydney away, which is another tricky fixture. So they've got to find a way to win from that group of games, probably 4, 5 of those, in order to get themselves into the 8 for the first time in their history.
Well, I certainly won't be jumping off the Gold Coast Suns if they don't potentially win many of those games and don't make finals. I don't think there's a reason to be jumping off. I'm super excited about some of their stars, and I think their season is really, you can look towards their leaders as obviously the barometers, because all their leaders have stepped up, and the ones I want to talk about are Jack Lukosius. He averages above high in disposals, goals, marks, and elite for kicks this year. And like you said, has kicked 5 goals in 3 different games this year. Noah Anderson, above average for disposals, clearances, fantasy points, and smashed all his career averages. Matt Rowell is absolutely killing it, and he's one of the highest clearance payers in the AFL and smashed all his career averages. And then 2 that I just think are really underrated are Jared Witts. He should be an All-Australian this year. He's above average for disposals, kicks, and elite for clearances, hit-outs, and hit-outs to advantage. That's just your perfect ruckman in my eye. And then obviously Sam Collins, who's had a remarkable career. Started at Fremantle, had a couple of seasons there, and then was delisted, had a season playing in the lower leagues, and then got drafted to Gold Coast, and just has looked a mainstay in their defence and really, really been a leader back there for him. How have you seen Sam Collins?
Yeah, I think unheralded. I always hate the expression when people say, if you played for a Victorian club, but I think that is relevant in Sam's case. I think if he was playing for Collingwood or Essendon, the attention that he would receive would be far more than it is currently. He's amongst the better defenders in the comp. Ballard's obviously having a borderline All-Australian season for the Gold Coast as well.
Well, let's move over to the trade talk medal, Daz, and you're going to kick us off with some honourable mentions.
Yeah, Dom Sheed had 43 possessions in his 150th game, second most by anyone in that milestone. I think Gary Ablett Jr. had 46, but yeah, Sheed kicked a couple of goals as well. I thought that was an honourable effort. Jack Riewoldt winding back the clock with 5 in a big game against the Giants. And I thought Jordan Ridley, almost the equal of Zach Merritt, if he didn't play against the Kangaroos, Essendon certainly would have been beaten. So he gets an honourable mention.
He's a fantastic player, Jordan Ridley, and we're going to talk about him later in the show. Actually, another one is Tim English. He had a fantastic game, but he was beaten out because obviously the Western Bulldogs lost to Geelong. His counterpart actually got the 3 votes this week, and that was Tom Stewart. Had an absolutely fantastic game. 2 votes, Zach Merritt, whose form is probably the best month in the AFL so far of any player, and 1, Christian Petrarca. He's just absolutely dominating with the absence of Clayton Oliver. He's really stepping up for the D's. looking forward to continuing the Trade Talk medal and putting those votes together. But we're going to move over just to a market watchdog. And Darren, there's a couple of moves on the Betfair Exchange you want to highlight.
Yeah, I've been focusing on Port and Brisbane for the highest ranked non-Victorian team. So they're now dead even at $1.95 a piece. But Brisbane are a bit shorter for the flag at $5.40, Port Adelaide at $7. So the predictor has them finishing basically neck and neck, but they still have Brisbane slightly more likely for the premiership. Melbourne back into second favourite, obviously the ultimate barometer for them on the King's birthday against Collingwood. Pose the question to you. You can answer it either now or later if you want, but the market is suggesting that the top four is a lock. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, we spoke about this off air. I don't think it's a lock. I definitely think the fourth spot is up for grabs. I'd be happy to say Collingwood's a lock, Port Adelaide's a lock, Brisbane I think would be a lock. It's just the Melbourne position I'm not 100% sure with, and their price is so short on the Betfair Exchange. I think there's some value there at least to trade. What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, I think it's more about trying to find somebody that's playing well enough to take their spot.
100%.
So St Kilda were around the mark, but not playing at that level anymore. The Bulldogs have lost their last two. Adelaide have obviously got to sort out their record on the road. Geelong, they get players back. You always trust that they'll be okay, but obviously coming from a reasonable distance back. So I think it's more who's going to take their spot. But yeah, I agree. There's some vulnerability in there.
Well, definitely something we're going to talk about is the players and the Brownlow predictor and how that's moving. And I'm going to go through the Brownlow predictor. Nick Dacos is solid after a 3-vote game. Predicted votes against West Coast at Optus Oval. He's on 19 votes and currently $3 on the Betfair Exchange. Christian Petrarca in second with 17.5. Zach Merritt, who was actually ineligible, but he's predicted to have 16.5. Tim Taranto, 15. His form has been stellar the last 5 weeks. Predicted votes in his last 5 games. And then obviously Zach Butter, the big firmer, on 13. He moved into something as short as $6. He's back out to $8.20, so just firm slightly. And then Clayton Oliver, after missing 2 games, is also on 13 votes, $15 on the exchange. We'll talk about him, but anything on the Brownlow predictor you want to have a look at, Daz?
Yeah, Petrarca obviously continuing to shorten. Obviously, the predictor has him a vote and a half behind Dacos, but with a lot of 2.5s and 1.5s and those sorts of things. Into 7s on the back of a probable 3 votes. Obviously, Zach Merritt's right up there, but can't win it due to that suspension. Noah Anderson, who we spoke about, you can get as much as $46 on him, and the predictor has him half a vote behind Bontempelli, who's at 9s. So it does put and Butter's also only half a vote ahead at $8.20. So if you think the Gold Coast can get on a bit of a run, you've got half a vote separating 3 very good players that are 8, 9, and 46 in the market. So bit of value there for Noah.
I think we laid off Marcus Bontempelli earlier when he got to as short as $4. He's drifted a little bit, but I don't think there's any reason to stop laying him. I think he's well under the odds, considering he's so far behind in the predicted voting. And even if he did catch up, the market still likes him way too much.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, Dad?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's a noted superstar, obviously, that they think would attract attention and therefore will always be a presence around those markets. But it's probably similar to Oliver. If someone else had that injury and missed a couple of games, they might have drifted even further than that. I mean, we look here, and obviously Jordan De Goey drifted out significantly. You can put a line through him. He'll get suspended in the next 24 hours, you would think. But yeah, I think certain players do carry a name into these things. Although Lockie Neal, not so much for some reason at the 23s at the moment.
Well, we're going to talk about him in our betting strategies, but I think it was interesting that before Brisbane's bye round, Lockie Neal didn't have a bad game by any stretch of the imagination, but he was tagged by Ben Keys, who's had an excellent season for the Adelaide Crows, and then go into the bye. That could potentially be some sort of strategy, because I've seen a few players drift off the fact that their team has had byes. So it's definitely something I'm going to watch this week.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think every market moved in that sense except the rising star. So Mitch Owens actually went from 18s to 14s with St Kilda not playing. But everything else, as you say, like Brownlow markets, if they didn't play and couldn't get votes, it's not a case of one less game or anything like that. They generally drifted out. So, yeah, Lockie Neal was, I think, 24s into 12s, back out to 23s in a space of a week, which is, quite fascinating movement.
Something we'll keep an eye on, Daz. Well, we're going to head to our favourite segment. It's buy, hold and sell. I'm going to kick off with you, Daz. What are you buying this week?
Buying Georgie Wardlaw at the Kangaroos. Only had 17 on Sunday, but an absolute beast. I think he's a player to watch really going forward for the Kangaroos. His grunt work, his ability to extract the ball from clearances. We speak about Matt Rao being a beast in that space. I think Kangaroos fans should like what they get out of Wardlaw going forward.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to buy a Carlton and Collingwood multi, actually. Betfair Exchange offer multis, and you can either back or lay them. You're getting 4.10 on the Betfair Exchange to back that particular multi. I've had a look at Sportsbet. They're offering $3.70, and at Ladbrokes, $3.56. So there's clearly some value on the Betfair Exchange. Look, Carlton have won their last 3 games against the Bombers. The Bombers in the last couple of weeks have just beaten North and Richmond, and the Eagles put up a pretty solid fight against them. So I'm not particularly sold on the way that they're playing at the moment, but that doesn't say that they're not going to go out and beat Carlton. Their form might be a little bit iffy, so that's a bit of a watch there. The big concern is, how do the Blues stop Zach Merrett? Like I said earlier, he's probably the most informed player in the competition at the moment. And then the other one is Jordan Ridley, who had an injury, came back, and has just been dominating. He's so important for Essendon. And I'd almost happily say that he's the most underrated player in the competition. He averages 20 disposals as a key backman, 7 marks, and continues to just compete as hard as he can against some of the biggest forwards in the competition. So that's what my concerns against Carlton are, probably those 2 players. But obviously Carlton have the form against them, and they're not playing the worst footy. They're playing good sides and losing. So looking at Carlton there. The other one is the Pies. I think the Pies are just well over the odds on the Betfair Exchange, which we're going to talk about. Back at the MCG, they've won their last 3 games against Melbourne. I don't think Melbourne are going good enough to suggest that they could potentially beat them at this moment. Collingwood are now 11-1 this season. Melbourne are 8-4 with 2 losses in their last 3 games. So they're not the most informed team. You're getting $2.02 for Melbourne and $1.97 for Collingwood. And that is way too even for mine. I think Collingwood should be much shorter than that. So I'll be buying Collingwood just outright against Essendon, and I'll also be having a look at that multi just to add a little bit of value for there. Daz, what do you think?
Yeah, both those games being pretty much even money feels like it's like a blockbuster market, where it's like, oh, okay, it's the King's birthday eve, so Carlton and Essendon, big rivals. I mean, Essendon should be favourite, but I agree with you that Carlton, I keep saying that they're going okay in terms of being competitive, but obviously they keep losing. 7 of their last 8 they've lost, but they've had moments in all of those matches, and the issue seems to be going forward where they're breaking down. I feel they're going to win a game eventually, and obviously a target like that on Essendon's head, it feels possible. And I agree. I don't think Melbourne should be almost line ball with Collingwood in the markets. They can win for sure, but Collingwood's season has been vastly more impressive, and I think they should be shorter.
It's a weird betting strategy, but it's something that comes to mind. I feel like they're going to win eventually.
I agree.
They have to get a win soon.
They're not that bad.
They're not that bad. So Melbourne made it a really scrappy game on Friday night and just absolutely suffocated Carlton. Hopefully there's a little bit of learning out of that. But who are you holding on this week, Daz?
Adelaide, very good side, but just their away record. So they're 5-2 at the Adelaide Oval this year. The losses came surprisingly to Richmond and by a point to Collingwood, but they're 1-4 on the road. Their only win was against Hawthorn by 3 points in Tasmania, who are obviously in the bottom 4. So at the moment, that could stop Adelaide from playing finals. They look obviously a good enough side to do so, but they've got to translate that onto their road record. So if you line them up with an Essendon or a Fremantle in terms of top 8 markets, that would be the knock I would have on them. It's just that they've just got to find a way to win games away from Adelaide.
Yeah, nice, Daz. Well, I'm having a look again at Melbourne, just holding on them for the top 4. Look, they're probably closer to a lay, but I'm going to hold on them because I don't want to make a move just yet, but they're currently $1.31 to make the top 4. I'm not totally convinced with how they're going, but at the same time, I'm not totally sure who's going to take their spot. We spoke about the Western Bulldogs, Geelong, St Kilda, Fremantle, like whether they're the best options to take up that 4th spot. We're not quite sure, so that's probably why I'm holding on them at this stage. And yeah, we'll have a look at that. But Daz, who are you selling this week?
Just selling a bit of, it was difficult to find one, but obviously the Jordan De Goey conversation. It's been fascinating. Obviously, West Coast somewhat innocently sharing information about him going to the tribunal. It is unusual for a club to do that about an opposition player, but also some of the comments like Dom Sheed saying he should get a couple of months, and then no one really flying the flag, and even Collingwood fans getting their back up about it. It's been just a bit of a dog's breakfast all over the place. He'll get, it wasn't a dirty act, it was a mistake. He'll get 3 or 4 weeks, and I'm not sure anyone, West Coast, Collingwood supporters, anyone have covered themselves in glory really with that.
I do like when players have a go at other players in the media.
It is rare.
It is rare, but when it does happen...
but none of them had a go at him on the ground, which was interesting.
No, they didn't. When it happens in the media, it's certainly... I get the popcorn out. It's very entertaining for me. Is there any moments... one comes to mind for me, but are there any moments where you can remember players having goes at other players in the media?
Ackermanis used to do it a bit. He used to talk about players either getting free kicks too much or players being, going missing in big games, and obviously did that a lot before their grand finals against Collingwood, and obviously proved to be right. But I think that ended up damaging that relationship with Brisbane. But it was interesting. That's for sure.
I know that you've spoken about the Ed Langdon incident, Melbourne versus Collingwood,
which is the type of honesty you want to see. He basically said, "Look, we think they've got a game plan that can be exploited. We think we know how we can beat them, and I don't mind. Of course, they're having those meetings. We know those conversations are being had, and Collingwood proved that wrong by beating them. And I think we want players talking about that. So
I think they've only lost 4 games since that comment was made. So Collingwood are certainly, sticking it to Ed Langdon there. Melbourne aren't going as well as Collingwood. But let's talk about our betting strategies for this week. So you are going to put on the Betfair Exchange?
Yeah, there's a couple of good prices. We spoke about those games earlier. I think North Melbourne, we talk about their ability to cover the line. They're playing at Hobart, where they are pretty hard to beat against the Giants. Now, the Giants did beat the Cats away a couple of weeks ago, but they're 4-8, so they haven't had a super season. North are about 287, 290 in that game. So I think that's pretty good value. I'd have that game close to 50-50 or even North marginal favourites on form. So I like the price. And Fremantle $1.51. I know they're coming off a bye against Richmond, but on their form, 4 wins in a row, beating the Cats and obviously beating Melbourne at the MCG, I think they should be a little bit shorter than that. So I like the price on North, I like the price on Fremantle.
I just can't believe the price to back Collingwood on the Betfair Exchange. You're getting almost $2, $1.97 to beat Melbourne. Collingwood have only lost 1 game this season, and Melbourne have lost two out of their last 3. I think it is, and beat a pretty poor Carlton. So, I think Collingwood is the one there. And I spoke earlier about a multi on the Betfair Exchange. You're getting value, $4.20 for a Collingwood win and a Carlton win. So, I think there's great value on the Betfair Exchange there. The other one you spoke about, Lachie Neale has drifted for the Brownlow medal. I think it's because of the bye. He was also tagged out by Ben Keys before that when Brisbane played Adelaide. He was in great form, so I expect him to just get straight back into it, especially after a break. They're my plays there.
And they play Hawthorn at the MCG this week, so not an obvious matchup for him, and at the same time a game that they'll probably win. So decent chance for some votes for Lachie, which will shorten him up again.
Well, it's been a great show so far, Daz, and we're going to get into our back or lay questions, and I'm going to let you kick it off first. What's your question for me?
Funny one. Thursday night footy's back. So back or lay. Now, from my point of view, I'm obviously a football tragic. I love watching it, but at the same time, there is a very small portion of my brain that thinks it's okay to miss something. I think sometimes with cricket, there's almost too much saturation. Is Friday to Sunday the okay standard block for footy? I mean, I'll watch Thursday every day of the year when it's on, but are you a back or a lay for Thursday night footy?
I'm in an AFL sense. I'm very incredibly progressive. I love to try new things. Like, I'm a massive fan of potentially moving the AFL Grand Final to a twilight or even night game. Thursday night footy just seems like a really easy one for me. It ticks so many boxes. And we also get to test out that footy gets played a little bit earlier. I reckon the Friday night games are too late.
Agreed,
7:40, 7:50. Like, let's get the game starting at 7 o'clock. My dinner booking's always 5 o'clock. I'm done at 6 and I'm just ready to watch the footy. So, I think this Thursday night footy is probably going to be good on a consistent basis for the AFL to bring in some data and insight and see what the fans actually want. But you can only do that on a consistent basis. And we haven't seen much winter Thursday night footy, so I'm keen to keen to keep on supporting it where I can.
And it's generally been outside of Victoria up until this year. There's been a few, obviously, in Victoria. We're back on Thursday night in Sydney, but it seems to have been an Adelaide, New South Wales market primarily for Thursday night football. But it certainly fits better than Monday, put it that way. I think, obviously, early in the week, you're less likely to get good crowds in terms of what it does for the working week for people trying to get up the next day.
100%, Daz. So let's move on to my question for you, Daz, and I can't wait to talk about this because I reckon it's an absolute perler comparison. Back or lay this? Which 10 players would you rather? And we're going to put a graphic up on screen now.
Yeah, obviously, Jared Witch is a bit of a selling point there because obviously Carlton, they've got Pitney, but he's not in their top 10. So if you were starting a side, obviously having a ruckman who could anchor that would be really appealing. Some of those Gold Coast boys pretty young, like Anderson certainly, and Rowell. Ballard's having a ripper year. Ben King, a young emerging key forward. I mean, you look at Carlton with Curnow and Mackay, it doesn't get much better than that combination. Wiedering is elite. I'd say Gold Coast because they're comparable but younger. Obviously, Cripps is an absolute superstar, but has been fairly banged up. Walsh is young, but you look at Anderson, Rowell, King, Lukosius. For me, just that youth factor tips it in their direction.
Do you think that there's more versatility in the Gold Coast side just there? I mean, having a look at the Carlton side, you've got Patrick Cripps, Sam Walsh, Adam Chera, Matt Kennedy, and George Hewitt, who are all inside Bulls.
Yeah.
They might not play as inside Bulls, but I reckon on their footy cards, their specialties would be inside game. What do you think about that, Dad?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the versatility on the Carlton probably comes from Doherty, who could play midfield or back. But yeah, the Gold Coast certainly. I mean, Lukosius has played at both ends. Ben King is even, I know he'll only play forward, you'd think, for the rest of his career, but he has played at both ends. And just the variety they get out of some of those guys. Keen to see what they do with Tuke Miller, obviously, when he comes back in, given their midfield blend. So, yeah, Suns at the moment. But look, I mean, it's a pretty good group of 10 on both sides.
It seems to me that Carlton probably has the better spine there.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yep.
But it looks like just Gold Coast midfielders, there's a bit more versatility there. So final answer, which one are you taking?
Gold Coast.
Gold Coast.
But if you lose the bet, I don't think you're too worse off. But Gold Coast for mine.
Well, that makes Gold Coast continue to be a really exciting prospect. And I've absolutely loved watching them this year and I want to continue to follow them. That's all we got time for this week. Daz, what are you most looking forward to on the weekend?
Hopefully a response from the Saints on Thursday night. But yeah, very much looking forward to that King's Birthday Eve, King's Birthday double, the Carlton Essendon, Collingwood Melbourne. Bit of movement for those sides.
The first time they're having a crack at the King's Birthday Eve with Essendon Carlton playing that game. So looking forward to that one. That's all we got time for on Trade Talk. For more trade talk and our betting strategies, head to the Betfair Hub now.
Imagine what you could be buying instead. For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.